Wouldn't it be great to have a little hotline that just goes right to God? There would never be a question of if he heard the prayer, because of course he hears all of our prayers. But the questions start to arise when wondering if he's going to do anything about our prayers and the things that we're asking for. Well, there's actually a way for us to know for certain, and all we have to do is look to our gospel and our readings today to get the full picture. And we know that from both the first reading from Sirach and the responsorial psalm, the common phrase that we hear so often, the Lord hears the cry of the poor. God the Father has always been close to the poor, to the weak, to the widow, the orphan, the oppressed, these people who are the most vulnerable in the society. Not because he loves them more than anybody else or because he set them apart as his favorite people. Not even just because they're suffering, but their suffering and great need leads to their ultimate dependence on God. And it's clear that everything that they have is completely free gift from God. And in their prayer, the only way that they can approach God is in humility, which is the only proper way to approach God in prayer. There's nothing that we can say or do that can earn any more of God's love. Nothing that we can say or do that will add a single day to our lives. Everything we have, from the clothes on our back to the air in our lungs, is a beautiful free gift from the Father every day. And his grace is sufficient for the needs of the poor. But not only the poor, his grace is sufficient for all of us. His glory is made perfect in our weakness. And we avoid pridefulness then at all costs. It is the complete opposite of humility and then poses that big problem when you try to pray. To see this clearly, Jesus tells us a parable in our gospel today, holding up two people who embody the total opposites. There's the humble tax collector who stood in the back, not even raising his eyes to God, just beating his breast, praying, asking for God to be merciful to him. A beautiful example of turning to the Lord in his need. But then on the other hand, there's the Pharisee who took up an honored position. And in the gospel, it aptly says that the Pharisees said a prayer to himself. He didn't pray a prayer to God. He said a prayer to himself. And so, because his prayer that he says doesn't even sound like he even cares about God, he's just bragging about himself in his prayer. And he's looking to be praised for how holy he appears to be, while he basically is now putting himself in God's place and continues to pray essentially then to himself. And so we obviously know which example we want to be following. And to grow in humility and prepare ourselves for our time of prayer, we need to empty ourselves, like St. Paul says. We give everything that we have to God. Because prayer by its nature is extremely humbling. It takes a very humble person to be able to look at their life and say, I need something or I need someone and I can't do this on my own. So you turn to God and ask. The prideful person will work themselves to death, never admitting that they need help of any kind. Meanwhile, the Lord is just showering down his blessings on his beloved while they slumber. And as we humbly approach this holy altar today to receive the body and blood of our Lord, we leave all of our anxieties and worries at the foot of the altar. We leave them all in God's hands. We give up our pride, and in exchange we receive the bread of the angels. Seems like a pretty good trade to me.